Howdy, I'm going to show you how to do some unit testing with Google Apps Scripts. It relies upon a module that I've been working on for a while now, and just want to show you what it looks like in real live code. So for this example, we're making a sample app. This sample app is very simple. This app has a namespace called app that has a method called thing, and when you use that, it returns a thing which can speak. Now, if we can send in configuration information for each call to thing to tell what kind of thing to make. In this case, if it makes a thing called a duck, when it asks to speak, it throws an error because ducks can't speak, of course. Anyway, so that's a very simple application. So I'm going to show you how it all ties together, what it looks like in code. So let's go to the thing module. So this is how I get the this app namespace with the thing method. I use a self-invoking function. So this here will be passed as a global, and the factory will be actually this whole function here. So the idea here is that I make the namespace.app, and I add to that namespace thing, which is a function in which I can pass the config, and it returns a factory method that will apply. So basically, even if this doesn't make any sense, you can just think of it as the thing.app is implemented all in here. So inside of this, I set the default value if config is not passed to make it an empty object, and if the kind is not passed to make it a human by default. And then I look at see what kind of object have I passed into it, and based on that, if it's a duck, I return an object that has a speak function which throws the error. If it's a human, it returns a speak function which says hello, depending on what language we're in. Okay, so that's how that's implemented. Then this is the good part. This is the unit testing. So this is the unit testing function, and it uses a PKG namespace instead of app. And the reason I use a PKG, like a package interface namespace, is because I like to separate the application logic from like dependencies or other things I'm using. And so when I have this module utgs, what it lets me do is it lets me use these describe and it functions, and if you know Node.js or Mocha, you'll recognize that. Alright, so when I have this variable here for my package, I send it to a self-invoking function, and the reason why I use a self-invoking function here is simply so I can categorize it, but that is optional. But basically the idea is you want to use these describe methods and the it in order to write out your unit test using assertions. So let's see here. In this assertion, human thing is the default thing. And so I'm testing that here. I've made a new thing. The default, I've not passed any config in there. I'm asserting that two things are equal. I'm asserting that the expected and the actual values are equal. And if it isn't, it will give me an error. And this is the same thing, same idea. It asserts that the expected value here, English, is the actual value of the language of the thing, and on. So let's go down to where I test for the duck not being able to speak. This assertion is a throw error assertion, which means it's saying you're going to throw the error inside of this function I'm passing you. It's just throw an error here. Okay, so that's what that looks like. When I test it, when I run this testing, it actually will output to the log in a nice little format to confirm that things work. I'm going to make a change here in my code. I'm going to go back. I'm going to switch out the languages here. So if the human is a Chinese speaker, it will say hello, and if the human is an English speaker, it will say ni hao, which is wrong. So the test should fail. I run the testing, and indeed I get a whole traceback, so I can figure out where it came from. I get comment for context, and I get 2 errors as expected. So the reason why I love unit testing for Google Apps Script, and I've written a module so that we can do this, is because when you're developing software, it can be very hard to track down bugs, and in addition to that, it can be very hard to describe what your modules do. And so if you use unit testing, you have a complete description of what your module does, and that is in actually functioning code rather than in commenting or in some sort of documentation. And so that's what I think the features are in unit testing that's so desirable to have, and why I think we should use it. Alright, just the last thing. I have now a script here that's called test runner, and what it does is it actually runs all the tests that it finds in the project. It just looks to see what functions have the word begin with the prefix testing underscore, and utgs has its own unit tests all there. So since it begins with the testing prefix, it will run, and so will this also run, and will output that it did not pass. So all I have to do is go to here to this script, and if the tests, any one of the tests are failing, it will tell me very clearly. And so how to fix that? I simply go back and I go back to my test runner, and it's great. All right, thanks a lot.